How can nothing cause something? Can a non-thing affect a real thing?
How can we even ask a question like this? How can nothing cause something? That doesn't even seem to make sense because it seems like in order for any causation to occur, something needs to exist to do the causing. Material objects are things like this stick or this chalkboard. We can see it and we can interact with it. An immaterial entity is something like that thought I just had. You can't see it. It's private. It's in my head. It's in my mind. What about the weird in-between parts of the world? The nothings. So here we have this circle with a cutout in the middle. There's a hole. We'll just say that this hole is a nothing. There's nothing in there. There's an absence. If you look at the board behind me right here, you can see my shadow. So what is that shadow? Is a shadow kind of like this hole? What does this hole and this shadow behind me have in common? They seem to be nothings, but they also are things we can see and interact with. What just happened? What just happened was I went silent. You were watching and waiting and expecting something, and I went silent. And what is silence? It's an absence. Silences are nothing, but they're so powerful. They can cause discomfort, awkwardness. Sometimes they can even cause peace, calmness, tranquility. How can nothing affect us?
For example, can something as simple as an empty chair affect you?
Imagine going to a sports venue or a concert and seeing that it's not sold out, or that there are quite a lot of gaps, voids in space, unsold tickets. That might actually affect your energy levels and the atmosphere. If you're sitting at the dinner table and you realize that a loved one who used to sit in this chair all the time is no longer there, that absence and that empty seat could invoke loneliness and maybe even crying. So it's interesting to realize that something that's empty, defined by a gap, a void, a negation, can cause things.
Let's transition into shadows. Do you think that shadows are things?
If you look behind me, you can see this shadowy figure of my hand. What is that shadow? Do you think my shadow is a thing? One of the most interesting topics in shadows is actually things related to AI. AI doesn't understand shadows the way we naturally do. Self-driving cars had a really huge issue with shadows because they were interpreting them as holes in the ground or obstructions. Developers had to spend time training and teaching AI to not see shadows as obstacles or holes because they were taking different routes or making dramatic turns to avoid them, and they were actually harmless.
If shadows are nothing, then how is nothing a potential obstacle in the road? How can we see a nothing? Does this mean that shadows are objects? If we say that, then we also have to say that holes are objects.
Here's a list of some ways that shadows impact us in our lives. So, first, and the most common thing, is it cools us down. If we go in the shade, we're looking for shadows because it will prevent us from getting more hot. How does a nothing keep us from getting more hot? Another great example is time. So people have and still do sometimes use sundials. People would basically use shadows or this nothing that we're referring to give us knowledge about the world. So shadows can also give away your location. If animals are in hiding, they might have hid well, but their location was still given away by their shadow. Shadows affect plants, trees, agriculture, because those things require light to thrive. It's clear that shadows are not things, but we use them as if they're things. We refer to them as things, and they do have effects on our lives, our travel, the way we can tell time or gather knowledge about the real world, the way we measure buildings, or the way we can tell whether an object is 3D or not. Now we're going to talk about the way silences can affect us. Silence is the absence of sound. So we can refer to it as a nothing. It's an absence. So the first thing we have here is respect. Let's say someone says, let's have a moment of silence when someone passes away. So this nothing is actually a way to show respect or to honor someone. Silence is also a powerful tool in negotiation. So if you're mediating, or if you're on trial, if you're just dealing with business, then knowing how to stay silent and get comfortable with the awkwardness sometimes can help a business deal, or get someone to incriminate themselves further. Sometimes we even interpret silence as guilt. Like, if you weren't really guilty of something, then why are you being quiet? Another way silence is used is to create suspense. People can use silences to create a good buildup to something. Another way that silence can be used is to get your attention. So if you're watching a play, or if you're in a meeting and you're listening to someone and they suddenly go silent, it might cause you to actually pay more attention. Another fascinating way that silence is used is in forms of abuse. And it doesn't need to be violent abuse. It could be something as simple as someone stopped texting you, or they blocked you online. Your parents give you the silent treatment, or you notice your boss hasn't been talking to you as much. So we might take their silences a way to internalize how we feel about ourselves. But silences can also sometimes have positive effects on us. If someone is silent and listening to you, you might feel seen. You might feel like you have their full attention. They're a good listener. Last but not least, holes. So holes are an absence. So when we see a hole somewhere, that's where something is not. There's nothing there. It's an absence. So how do holes, which are an absence, a nothing, affect us? Holes affect travel. If you have a hole in your tire, if you have a hole in your boat, if you have a hole in the sidewalk, you now cannot do what you probably would have been able to do if the hole was not there. AI had trouble with shadows because self-driving cars were able to see the shadows as a potential hole or obstacle. Now there seems to be a little bit of confusion over whether holes are just shadows. Holes can cause damage to our homes, like a leak in the roof. It can damage equipment. It can damage parts of our body internally if there's a hole or perforation. Music. Think of a flute. There's no way the flute could make music without the holes. No holes, no music. And finally, holes that involve data sets, math, or symbolic logic can cause us to not be able to reach sound, valid, or accurate conclusions because there's either a null, an absence, a void, some kind of missing premise that is making the data set invalid.
So, how do you think it's possible for something that is not a thing to affect real things? Or are you willing to say that holes, shadows, silences, and empty chairs are real things, not nothings?